Welcome to Read, Watch, Play, your weekly dive into the stories we love and how they're adapted, discussing the genesis of our favorite books, movies, and games, and our sometimes not so favorite adaptations of those. We are coming to you live this week from the Overlook Hotel. This is episode 2, and we are covering The Shining. My name is Randy Berridge. I'm here with Nick Hinkson. He's got a bit of shine himself. Here we go.
We have got a lot to talk about today because I have some strong opinions of certain directors and their nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, there are strong opinions in every facet around this movie, and ever evolving. It's kind of weird, but so
I don't understand.
Again.
One of these groups of people is objectively wrong, and we're going to talk about why they're objectively wrong today.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and yeah, I'm really eager to get into it, and I've just been. I mean, because obviously we weren't born then or alive when this came out, even remotely. So crazy the vibes just of how people felt about this then, and how people feel about it now. It's
completely different.
Yeah, it's nuts. Before we get too far into it, gotta know, how's it going, buddy?
Life's good. Life is good. I can't complain. Getting ready for a wedding next weekend.
Nice.
So I'm going to be going back up to Philadelphia area, heading out. I don't know. It's like an old tobacco distillery. It's going to be pretty. It looks pretty nice. I can't wait. See all my family.
That'd be cool. I'm a wedding guy. Like, some people don't like weddings. I guess it's when
you thrive.
If at least you're close to the people. I think they're such a fun time. Like, I've never had a bad time at a wedding.
No. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the weddings we've been to together, and it's never a bad time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I'm excited to get into The Shining.
I mean, before we do that, what do you think about the horror genre in general?
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't know. I have mixed feeling. I do not seek out horror whatsoever. I'm a complete baby. But I enjoy being along for the ride. And it's weird. Halloween is my favorite holiday. Haunted houses, dressing up. I enjoy it. I enjoy doing it with other people, I think.
Okay.
Like, I'm excited to watch scary movies come Halloween. With my girlfriend. I'm excited to, I was excited to read this book, honestly, but I'm never looking on Netflix, alone, see a scary movie and think that's what I want to watch, right? Like, never in a million years.
Not in a hotel room by yourself, trying to just
never. And book-wise, I think this might be the first horror book I've ever read. This is my first. This is kind of wild. I think this is my first Stephen King book, and it's my first movie based on a Stephen King book.
You didn't see The Dark Tower?
No.
Wait, actually, I'm going to tell you right now that that's a lie, and we'll get into that later, because there's some things I don't think you realize are Stephen King that I know for a fact we've watched together.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. We'll see, but I'm not a horror guy at all. What about you?
Love it. I cannot get enough of this genre. I could not. It's not that I disagree with you, because I think your take is kind of like more in the middle of the ground, but I love when I thrive on not being able to sleep after like a psychological thriller. It is so much fun for me to just be anxious for hours after watching these movies, because I'm positive somebody's in my closet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you always liked them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I feel too dissimilarly. I enjoy being scared in the moment. It's the after effect. I think I'm just too sensitive, where these things stick with me. I can't sleep. I have terrible dreams. Like, I just ruminate on it. I mean, back in college, I liked when we used to watch scary movies or something, as a unit. Alone, never going to happen. Literally never.
How old were we when Paranormal Activity came out?
I
16?
think high
Were we
school.
sophomores?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah. Like that.
That's a,
Can't do it. Is there a genre of horror you gravitate towards? Like, are you a slasher? Are you a paranormal? Are you a psychological thriller? All the
great
above.
question. I love paranormal and I like psychological thrillers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
most of that category. I thought movies such as uh what's the movie where the guy has like 23 personalities and they're all different people? I thought that was like way overdone, but something like anything like Jordan Peele does that
Yeah.
kind of falls
Oh,
into that
Get Out. It's
psychological thriller for
unbelievable.
me. And those are unbelievable movies.
Yeah.
I definitely like the paranormal. So like this Paranormal Activity,
Yeah.
The Conjuring, loved the Conjuring series. I got a story about that. I can tell you later too.
Yeah.
And I don't really enjoy like Saw or the slashers. I mean,
Yeah.
they're fun around Halloween time, but that's not for me.
Yeah. I'm too squeamish
I
for
don't know.
that. And
So,
also, they
would
don't
you say
scare
you like the?
they don't scare me as much
Yeah,
as a paranormal. It's gonna mess with me long term.
that's
Like,
where you gravitate to is the paranormal ones. Then
I have the most fun with them because
okay.
I'm such a baby with them.
Mhm.
Um, they really get me. I do. I guess it depends. Like, I wouldn't call some psychological thrillers a horror, but something that's creepy. Like, I like creepy. Like, I think of
Okay.
Shutter Island.
Yeah,
Pretty creepy book.
that's great. Yeah.
Love it. I mean, I flew through that one. Um, but yeah, paranormal gets to me. I enjoy some traditional scary movies like a Scream or a Halloween. Love those. I mean, they're
Hmm.
like they're
So yeah,
classics.
yeah. But back then, like those types of like thrillers and slashers, they weren't way overdone. It wasn't
Yeah,
all about how much blood can you fit into an hour and a half. There's like a plot line to those
yeah,
movies.
yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
I feel like in general, horror is like it's kind of having a moment right now, and I don't even know if it's right now, but horror movies are doing well at the box office. And I think it's because they're like inexpensive to make usually,
Yeah.
and so the costs are down. So to like turn a
Yeah.
profit, like it's not that difficult, and people like show up for them. Like people who like horror movies show up for horror movies in the theater because there's something about the theater
Yeah.
experience to seeing it.
Oh, that
So
sound.
yeah,
It, I was just about to ask you what you think makes a movie or book scary, but I got to say the score is what it is for me. If you have a good score to a horror movie, it can change. It can make not scary movies terrifying if you have a
yeah,
good score.
yeah. It's perfect for tension building.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, what is it for you though? Like what makes you on the edge of your seat, holding your girlfriend's hand a little tighter? What is it that gets you right
yeah.
there?
I mean, sound is up there. I think what is really it for me is like plausibility of if I'm watching something and it feels like this could actually happen, or something just is unanswered, like an unsolved mystery, that stuff just like
Hmm.
gets to me. So I would say, however whatever the story is, if it feels like this is something that could be reality, that
Yeah.
that bothers me a lot in a good way. Yeah,
So,
I have very limited amounts I can handle. Like I have to if I watch
mhm.
something scary, I need a good month off. And it doesn't even need to be scary. It's like, true crime is big now and like all the like cult
Yeah.
documentaries. I can handle those very sparingly because I just get so freaked out by them. It's just too much for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I guess to speaking to what you find believable,
Mhm.
I mean, where do you stand on the paranormal?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I'm so scared by it, like I don't know, rationally, I'm like, no, ghosts don't exist. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. And but then I'm like, well, then why do I get scared by them? Like why does it freak me out? Like why
Yeah.
can't I walk in the bathroom with the lights off? Something is freaking me out. or like paranormal
Yeah.
movies bother me so much. So I don't know. I I realistically and rationally would say no. I don't believe in that. But
Yeah.
when push comes to shove and I'm in a scary situation, I'm believing it. I'm freaked out. What
Yeah.
about you?
I think I'm along similar lines. You know, I definitely wouldn't say I believe in ghosts or spirits
Yeah.
or the paranormal, but there was one time, I know this is everybody's story. There was one time in college where I was convinced I was not alone in my room and I knew exactly where to
Yeah.
look too. I mean, I like shot up, my room was cold and I felt like someone was looking at me from that corner. And in Westchester, those houses are old, man.
Yeah.
Like someone definitely died in that room. Now I say that that was also the year Dr. Sleep came out.
Yeah.
And I was reading that. So I was in the middle of a Stephen King book and then I shot up in the middle of the night and that happened. So like logically I'm like, okay, like be so for real right now,
Yeah.
Nick. But at the same time, I am not convinced that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you're just the spidey senses are tingling.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
creepy.
I don't know if it's to your point, I was like, I don't know if it's just like you get when you are good at suspended disbelief and like just ignoring a lot of the stuff that doesn't make sense in a movie or a book and just enjoying the ride, if that like
Yeah.
is something you have to like turn off to not feel that way before you go to bed, or I don't know. I could just be making that up,
Yeah.
but I was reading a Stephen King book and then I thought I saw a ghost, and that's the only time I've ever thought I saw a ghost. So
Yeah.
like, who's to say?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, which is it's an interesting thought process with this book too, which we'll get into with this in the movie. Is like what is real
Yeah.
and what's not, which is I don't I still am conflicted on. I've got a pretty good story that I'm excited to get into
Okay.
when we're talking a little bit about it that actually has to do with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into any background stuff, I just want to hit a few things that we might have gotten wrong in the last episode before we get into The Shining. We were talking a little bit about what other Spielberg films, I think you had asked this, were the highest grossing of all time. Like, how many has he
Mm-hmm.
had?
Yeah.
And the only other one was Jaws. And I think
That
we
was
might
the
have
only other
mentioned that,
one.
at least
Really?
up until Jurassic Park. I think so, because it has to be.
Oh, up until Jurassic Park. Yeah. Okay.
Because it was Jaws, and then we talked about Jurassic Park, for a
Yeah.
bit, and then Titanic came in '97 and held the crown until Cameron beat himself. So there
Oh,
hasn't
with
really been any
Avatar.
since then. Yeah, beat himself with Avatar.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
And when was Avatar? Like 2011, 2012?
I think it was 2010. It
Okay.
was when
Okay.
it was right between a school college, so it was around that 9-10 period.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think you're right. Okay.
Yeah. The other one was we were talking about. I was wondering if one of Michael Crichton's other books, Prey, was recently made into a Hulu series. It was not. It was just a sequel to the Predator movie. It was actually on Hulu. We still got good reviews. Velociraptors are real. Confirm that after the show. I know. I still can't. I don't know. I swore I read somewhere that he invented them, and I just assumed no different. And looking back,
Randy, you said that and I questioned my reality.
yeah,
I thought my whole life was a lie. I was convinced you were about to tell me that velociraptors weren't real and I'm an idiot.
yeah. I, I don't know what I was thinking. Why I thought that. Yeah, especially
That
when
would
he's like
be
known for like painstakingly researching his books. Why would he just
yeah.
make up the villain, or maybe the villain, depending how you see it? Yeah, that was all. So we'll probably just run through those things. Maybe at the beginning. I don't know if we'll keep doing that, but we'll see. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, cue the music.
Let's do it. What's your relationship to The Shining?
Dude, my relationship to The Shining started when I I can't remember if it was freshman or sophomore year, but it was definitely before we could drive. So it would have had to been the first part of sophomore year.
Mhm.
And I had a difficult relationship with reading in general, and my mom, and just being interested. And my mom had been buying me different things to try to read, and some of them I got through, some of them I didn't. But I remember when my mom bought me The Shining, it completely changed my view on what reading could be.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason alone, I mean, I read so much now, and I think for that reason alone, I'll always have a place in my heart for The Shining. But also, I was not a young teenager, but I was like mid-teens, and I
Yeah.
slept with the light on for a month.
Yeah.
I refused to, and not just like, oh, like a little nightlight. Like, no, I had like my overhead light on. I had my nightstand light on. I
Yeah.
had every light on in my room, and I refused to leave my room. I didn't care if I had to pee so bad. I was going to just sit there awake, holding it in until the morning,
Yeah.
because I was not going out of, I wasn't opening my door
Yeah.
for any reason for like a month.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. That's my relationship to The Shining.
How
I'm
soon
curious.
after reading did you see the movie? Did you see the movie or
Right
read the
after.
book first?
I read the book first.
Okay.
I actually hadn't heard of I knew who Stephen King was, and I knew about The Shining, but I hadn't really heard of like what The Shining was, or what it became, or what happened with the movie. You know, I didn't have any of that background going into it.
Interesting.
And I watched the movie right after, because my mom was like, "Well, you read the book. You want to watch the movie?
Yeah.
We can do it as a family." And I swear to God, it was just like that scene in Silver Linings Playbook where Bradley Cooper throws the book out the window. I was screaming at the television. I was like not having it,
Yeah.
especially with the end and with what they did to Dick. I think that might have been the first time I just had an unleashed like F-bomb rant in front of my parents, because I was not happy.
Yeah. Was that your first time you were thinking book is better than the movie? It's such a cliche, but is that your first, like, wow?
Yeah, honestly. It's, I mean, to be fair, it's, other than Harry Potter, I don't know that before that I had read a book and then intentionally watched the movie. So there wasn't a lot to compare it to.
Yeah. Did you know what The Shining was referring to before going into it?
No. I thought it honestly, until it was like, you know, it's kind of explained in the book why it's called The Shining. But I thought The Shining was going to be the horror plot of it, not characteristic of Danny.
Yeah.
And Dick, and I, it's actually, that's why, one of the reasons I think the movie's so bad. We'll talk about that later, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, you came into this book, we're 31 years old. You just read this book for the first time. I don't know if you had seen the movie before we rewatched it to do this, but reading this as an adult, and I think you probably had, not probably, I know you had a much better understanding of some of those complicated topics of like suicide, divorce, alcoholism than I had at 14. So I really want to know what you thought and what your kind of feelings on moving forward at like with a relationship with Stephen King and Stephen King books is because of The Shining.
Yeah. I mean, you said it, until 2 months ago, 3 months ago, had never read this, never seen it. And I read it because you recommended it, you know, for us to do here. And I was a little nervous going in because, like I said at the top, I don't read horror. But this, I mean, the book was incredible. Like, absolutely. Like, just a master at their craft right there. And
dude, it's like watching Messi play right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, it's a fucking clinic on writing. Freaking clinic on writing.
So good. I mean, and I knew, when I say I knew nothing about this, I knew what The Shining was. I'm, you know, a little bit of a movie nerd. So I was familiar with it. But the only things
when you say you knew what it was, like you knew it was the ability to communicate telepathically?
I knew of the existence of the movie,
okay.
you know, and obviously, you know,
yeah.
Jack Nicholson's performance is always considered like, you know, one of the best. But heading in, all I knew the Here's Johnny scene because they play it on like any award show celebrating movies or anything like that.
Yeah.
I knew it took place in Colorado, and we actually had a wedding we went to, and we stayed at the Overlook or Stanley Hotel.
That's awesome.
And they
That's
have
so
a
cool.
gift shop there, and they do tours. And
Yeah.
I was in the gift shop because that's also where they have like a cafe. And they
Oh,
had
okay.
all
Okay.
these things that said red rum on them, and I had no idea what it meant. But
Yeah.
I knew that it was The Shining. But I felt so dumb when I figured out what red rum meant. I also felt really dumb that I never thought about, like, why is this called The Shining? That's kind of like a weird title. And I also did know, that's right, I did know that about the twins, just from, that's another similar to Here's Johnny. When people talk about creepy stuff in movies,
Yeah.
always the twins holding hands. Um,
What about the blood coming out of the elevator from the movie?
didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
Yeah, didn't.
Okay.
I didn't even know the concept that, like, they were staying until we went to that wedding. I didn't even know that it took place at a hotel. I had no idea what we were going to be getting into. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. We'll get into it on the movie. My initial thoughts, similar. I don't know if I was as outright disgust that you have, but I definitely had that experience of, wow, this is so different. This book was so good, and they changed a lot, like a
Yeah.
lot.
Am I not hiding my
Yeah.
disgust?
I think
No.
you need to share a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, you absolutely nailed it. I mean, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Let's get into a little bit of background. There is so
Do it.
much within this book and this movie. And there's also been so much behind the scenes drama, and there was a documentary made. I don't know if you've seen it, Room
Oh, with the movie?
237. Yeah, about the
Yeah.
making of The Shining. There's just so much. Like, this is its own bubble. It's so interesting once you get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting into the book. So this was a horror novel, as we talked about, written by
Mm-hmm.
little Stephen King in
Who?
1977. Stephen King, ever heard of him?
Never heard of him. No.
Yeah, pretty
Is he
small
a friend of
time.
yours?
Yeah.
Did you go to our high school?
I think I spelled his name wrong in these notes. I think he's a PH guy, but I can't remember.
He is a
Yeah, it's a
PH.
PH Stephen. Um, I think this was his first bestseller, and really the one that
I think you're right.
propelled him to be kind of the behemoth he is today in American. I'd say he
Yeah.
is. If you said name an American author, he's probably one of the first three names people would mention. These, like,
For
current,
sure.
modern times. He's
Yeah.
he's massive. I mean, he's currently, I think, sitting somewhere between 500 and 700,000 copies on this book, which, remembering how much Jurassic Park sold, that's kind of wild. Jurassic Park was in the millions, but he has sold 350 million copies total, across all his, what do you call
That's
it? What
an
do you call a
absurd number
background
of
of books? Is it it's not a disc
catalog?
catalog, discography? Because I know discography is music. I don't know. The genesis of this story and the setting. This came from Stephen King's own experiences in a few ways, which kind of creeps me out a little bit. I'm just imagining myself writing this. I'm like, wow, you got to be in a dark place. I mean, he's been pretty public. Yeah, I spelled Stephen here right this time. He's been pretty public about his journey with addiction and alcoholism. This is one of
Yeah.
the few, like,
Yes.
I haven't read much of him, but one thing I've always known about him is he's very public about kind of what he went through, which is, I think, cool to share.
Yeah.
And this was drawing on that a ton, but he was also pulling from his visit to the Stanley Hotel, which was the inspiration. And this is in Estes Park, Colorado. I mean, the story goes essentially.
Okay.
What was that?
I said, okay. Yeah. I didn't know that. I'm learning
Yeah.
as you're reading right now.
Yeah, the story goes that, I mean, he was seeking some perspective shift to influence his work, because I think he's from somewhere in the Northeast. I want to say it's like New Hampshire or Maine or Massachusetts.
Vermont, Connecticut.
Yeah. And that's his early books. A lot of it was drawing from that. And he wanted
Yeah.
to head west to Colorado with his wife. And much of, like I said, much of his work, he was just wanting to get a little bit different with his approach. So he arrived in Boulder, Colorado, and him and his wife checked into the Stanley Hotel. And this was the day before Halloween 1974. And as you likely know from this movie and book, this is right at the end of the tourist season, and only
Yeah.
tourists, guests, can stay there. I think, what is it? I can't remember what it is in the book. Is it like May through October they're open?
May through October.
Something
Yep.
like that, the end of October. And they were the
Nailed it.
only guests for their stay there. And he had a pretty wild experience where they went down and they had dinner, and they were the only ones in the dining room. All the chairs were up,
Just like in the book.
just
Yeah.
like in the book. And his wife ended up going back to the room after dinner. And he said when he got back already, he had the whole story in his mind. Kind of this framework of this, alcoholic with writer's block, stuck at the end of the season here. And he was thinking about, like, what if
Yeah.
you got trapped here? And he said after his wife went to bed, he took a nighttime stroll through the hotel. A certified psycho behavior, by the way. There's a 0% chance I
A
am
little
walking
unhinged.
alone in my own house, let alone this hotel. Not like, that's all you need to know about Stephen King right there. And he ended up at the bar, and he was served drinks by a bartender named Grady, and it was just them two at the bar. And he said through the night he had dreams of his 3-year-old son running through the corridor, screaming, being chased by a fire hose. And he said he woke up with a jerk and was sweating. And he had the story. Did you know any of this?
No.
Isn't it wild?
I'm like on the edge of my seat here listening to you. This is why I'm not saying it. I'm just like entranced in what you're saying right now. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild.
Mind-boggling.
So many things about that are interesting. I mean, that sort of creative spark that can hit some people. You hear that all the time with writers, where there was this one moment where it's just like everything sort of slid into place and they just had the idea. And this was one of them. And it's even just creepy reading what they went through in that little stay there, and then what you know of the book.
Yeah. Dude, I have it in my notes, and we're going to talk about this later. I can't think of anybody else that can make a fire hose scary and put you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
And to hear that he's having that vision for his son in real life, like that is, oh my, can you imagine living with that mind?
Yeah.
Just having that happen to you? Like,
yeah.
Thank God he can write and get these experiences out, because if he had to hold those in, I don't know that he makes it out of that. Okay. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, it's a wild sort of origin of this, and then bringing it to reality. The only thing that he did that I would maybe do is, maybe I can understand him going to the bar and having a drink. You're staying at a hotel anyway. What else are you going to do? It's probably freezing cold in Colorado at that point. That's understandable. But walking the halls at night, no chance.
No, zero.
Yeah.
I don't even like going to the ice machine when I'm in a hotel, let alone walk around the whole thing.
Hotels, especially some, they're creepy. So much that has gone on there. Not for me. Not for me.
Nope. I will stay locked in my room with all of the bolts done, and I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I told you this when I was reading this book, because you had recommended it to me and I'd never read it before. I was traveling for work, staying in a hotel, and I was addicted to it. I mean, this book is so good. It's the definition of a page turner. And I've been reading it for a few hours, and then, I went to bed. 2 or 3 in the morning, the people in the room next to me, I don't know if they were like coming back drunk or something, but they thought my room was theirs, and they were like yanking on the handle and like banging and trying to get in with the card. And I sat up and
No.
I was like, this is it. I'm toast. I'm surveying like the windows, how to get out. But luckily they like gave up after a while. I'm a sleepy guy, so I was like back to sleep anyway in a few seconds. But I was like, you got to be kidding me. But then
That's nightmare fuel.
I woke up like in the morning. I was really questioning the reality. Like, did that actually happen, or was I just so freaked out by this book that I just invented this in my mind?
Who's to say?
Who's to say? Yeah. Oh man, movie wise, so this was a horror film from the legendary Stanley Kubrick that checked into theaters May of 1980. Was that 3 years after the book? Was that, I think I said 77?
Yeah, I think the book's from 77.
He had already established himself as a pretty big figure in the film industry at this point. He had Doctor Strangelove already, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange. And what's interesting is the fact that, he makes these three films and then he goes and does The Shining, a horror film. Like, could you imagine if, Martin Scorsese, came out that he was going to direct? Like, it's kind of like a weird move at the time, to kind of pivot to that. So pretty interesting. The movie was co-written.
Turns out it was a pretty poor choice too.
The movie was co-written by Diane Johnson. This might be the most insane fact about this. She has 2 writing credits in her life. One of them is this movie, and then the other one was like a small personal short film she made like 30 years later. Imagine writing The Shining and then just like peacing out for the rest of your life. Like, you would think she'd be in like real demand, but I guess it wasn't received that well at the time.
I say, yeah. I mean, it was not a box office success. I mean, if we're talking, like, it kind of makes sense, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
like,
but 0 credits after that? Crazy.
I mean, also, if working with Kubrick as a writer was anything like what the actor's experience, I'd probably quit writing too.
Yeah, she might have hung it up for good after that one. Movie famously stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as Wendy, and Danny Lloyd as Danny. Always love when somebody is named the same as their character. It's just works.
Nice little happy accident. Yeah.
I mean, we got 2 of those here. I wonder if it's just odd. This was released.
Couldn't find a Wendy?
I know. Yeah, no Wendy's out there.
There's no Wendy's in Hollywood?
Is Wendy short for anything?
I don't
Wendy's
think.
just
I mean,
Wendy.
I wouldn't know, but I'm going to say no. Winifred, maybe?
You're right. It probably is Winifred, but who's really named Winifred?
If we're
anymore?
wrong, we'll look it up and we'll talk about it at the beginning of the next episode.
Yeah.
That'll be a good fun tidbit.
Yeah. This was released on the same weekend as The Empire Strikes Back, and it grossed, probably just slammed it. I mean, that is, talk about a poor weekend to pick. Grossed $622K in its opening weekend, ended at about $47 million on a budget of $19 million. So kind of had a pretty good multiplier profit wise there. Decent return, but nothing eye-opening, nothing shocking. It honestly didn't even crack the top 10 for 1980, which this might be like an all-time year for movies. I was reading through the best of list from that year. Obviously, we already had Empire Strikes Back. There's also Caddyshack, Raging Bull, Blues Brothers, Kramer vs. Kramer.
Oh, that is a good year.
It was just, the movies were just hitting. I don't know.
Wait, but you would think, because like a lot of those movies that you're naming are like comedy and then Star Wars. You would think a horror could have snuck in there that people might want something else. Maybe if it didn't come out the weekend Empire Strikes Back did.
I mean, that can't have helped.
No.
But yeah, I don't understand, especially it's not like Stanley Kubrick was an unknown entity at that point.
Yeah.
And it's not like horror films were
Jack. Yeah.
On the down. This is immediately after, things like The Exorcist, So
Yeah,
horror
I
was in, honestly.
doesn't maybe if it was a better movie.
Yeah, I
I'm gonna
think
keep taking those shots.
the writer, Steven might have had some influence on the public perception because he notoriously is
Hated it.
hates it.
It's but that's fair. They literally. I'll wait.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll wait. I'll wait till we talk about it.
Um, the behind the scenes of this film. There have been documentaries made. There's so much
Yeah, they're all more
footage.
exciting than the movie. Yeah.
The articles. We'll save a lot for IMDb trivia. But there are actually several versions of the movie that they kept like trimming it down, so this kept getting shorter and shorter.
Really?
I think Stanley Kubrick was getting nervous with some of the reception, is what I've read, and was trying to edit it down. And like we
Wait.
said,
So
sorry, go ahead.
hang on. Let me ask you a question. He was getting nervous after they released it and it wasn't doing well, and then he tried to cut it down, or this was before he released it?
This was after it was released in theaters,
Oh,
and then
okay,
he
okay.
cut like 20 minutes out, I believe, and
Really?
they were they were releasing that version, and I think there might have even been a third cut. Um, so I think he was really struggling with the mixed reactions to this and trying to change it as it was coming, out the door. Like we said,
Okay.
I know,
Okay.
crazy. Um, and the legend goes of how this came about a little bit for Stanley Kubrick was he was interested in producing a horror film. His secretary, has gone on record saying that he would be planted in his office surrounded by books that she would bring him. And she could hear the thud of each book hitting the wall as he was like just trashing it. Like, nope, not going to work. Doesn't like it. Kind of the reject pile. And one day she
Yeah.
said that it had been a while since she heard anything. And she went in and he was in the middle of The Shining. And he knew that that was the movie he wanted to make.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of a cool tidbit.
It is,
I like that
yeah.
one.
And like you said, he has a reputation once they got into this of being pretty infuriating on set. He's well known perfectionist.
Yeah.
The tales, kind of at this point are urban legend. There's so much other stuff. People and Stephen King were initially really critical of Jack Nicholson casting, Shelley Duvall's performance and casting. I think a lot of it has eased or changed completely since then. But it was definitely not
I have a
helped.
lot of thoughts on Jack Nicholson being cast, and I think you're going to be surprised on my take on it.
Yeah.
Just saying. A little foreshadowing there for anyone that wants to listen.
Yeah, I feel like we almost need like a casting corner of this podcast because there's some crazy casting potentials with this one too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Bonus
like we said,
features.
this came out to mixed reviews. Roger Ebert said he really struggled to connect with any of the characters in the movie. And I don't think it's dramatic to say that since then, this has done one of the biggest 180s in film public perception history. And, at this point, it's like in the National Film Registry at the Library of Congress. People like study it in college. It was the first, movie to do like steady cam and tracking shots. So this has really come around in the years since. And from a franchise view, it's having a little bit of a resurgence in the past decade as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But yeah, I recommend anyone who's interested to check out some of the behind the scenes stuff because it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Skip the movie. Just watch the behind the scenes.
Yeah, I know.
You'll get the essence.
But I've gone on here long enough. Let's take a break and we'll come back with our thoughts and get into the categories on this one.
Questions at you? Some fast off the cuff. You
I'm actually
don't
going
think
to rip
about it.
them
Just
at
give me
you
your answer.
first.
Oh, you've got
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because
okay. I wonder if we have the same ones.
You gave them last time, so I kind of want to hear your thoughts off the start.
Yeah, let's do it.
Shelley Duvall is Wendy. Are you in or are you out?
Interesting take on the character. I don't know if I would think it's good or bad. It's just different.
What is scarier, book or movie?
The book by far. Like it's not even close. Don't give me that.
Was Jack's visions real or fake?
I'm going to say real, and we'll talk about that later.
Is this a good adaptation? Yes or no?
No. I don't know how else to say. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'd rather have my toenails plucked off than have to watch that again.
Yeah.
All right.
You wanna rip some on me, or do you want to get into
Yeah,
it?
you got any more? I was gonna say, all right, hit me with
I'm
the
good.
rest. You're good? The scariest moment in the book or movie.
What was it?
What was the scariest moment to you? It could be either the book or the movie.
Room 217, Danny's first visit in the book.
That's a good one.
Honorable
Who's the
mention to
biggest
the
villain in the
hedge
book?
maze, or not that maze, but the hedges,
Oh,
the topiaries
okay.
in the
Is it
garden.
the actual hedges, or is it the scene where Danny is in the like tube and the
Both,
hands coming out of?
both.
Okay. Who's the biggest villain in the book?
The hotel,
Yes, 100% agree. Who's the biggest villain in the movie?
the hotel.
Wrong. It's Stanley Kubrick, and there's no way you're changing my mind on that. Danny in the book or Danny in the movie?
I would say Danny in the book because he freaks me the fuck out. Though Danny in the
Yeah.
movie, shout out to that little kid. He did he
Yeah,
did
he
he did
did
a good
great.
job.
Yeah. And then what is your favorite scene in the book? Doesn't have to be your scariest or anything, but what is like the one scene that you're like, that was awesome. You nailed it.
I mean, the things that really got me was Jack at the party with Grady making drinks. I'd even back up a little bit, and this will overlap with another category. Uh, Jack's first conversation with Lloyd the bartender. Just crazy stuff.
Yes.
But I think the hedge
Yes.
scenes with Danny, with Jack and with Danny, when they feel like they're chasing them, Danny gets trapped in that little tunnel thing. Oh my god, just too much.
All excellent, all excellent choices. You really couldn't go wrong there, but I think you have some solid takes on the book scenes. I think those are all terrifying.
Yeah,
That's all I got for you, though.
let's do it. We'll hit some quick thoughts, and then I think we'll get into our categories. So I think my first sort of category question I have for you is, you know, The Shining. Put yourself in Stanley Kubrick's shoes. You win the rights to this movie. What do you think is the most important thing you need to get right for this adaptation to work?
The Shining. And this is the biggest qualm I have with the movie is Randy. The book is called The Shining.
Yeah.
The entire story is a character, and especially if I know Kubrick wasn't alive for this, but especially if you incorporate Doctor's sleep into this as well, it's the story of Danny and the psychological trauma that comes from being able to not only communicate with other people telepathically, but have this innate awareness of all the evil that's happened in the world in every room you're in.
Yeah.
Right? When he sees the blood on the wall, when he goes into room 217, which I think they changed to 237 in the movie,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, which feels like a pointless change. But you have to figure out a way to incorporate that. And he did. The only way it was incorporated was with the finger Danny.
Yeah.
Tony, why don't you want to go to a hotel? I don't know. you do too. No, no, come on, tell me. Don't want to. Please. No. Tony, tell me.
and,
Tony.
and living in his mouth. And I was like, that, and that alone didn't bother me because how are you going to
Yeah.
have a child actor communicate what Tony
Mhm.
is other than that? And I was like, fine, whatever. That's cool. But then the only other mention of it is when Dick has that conversation with him in the kitchen while they're eating ice cream,
Yeah.
which was only part of the conversation that happened in the book. And I get why you couldn't have the telepathic parts, but that's like that information is super important. So honestly,
Mhm.
you want to fix the movie and you want to know why I think Jack Torrance was cast brilliantly as Jack Nicholson in this movie. If you get rid of that conversation and just don't have the Tony talks, and then you put Dick in Denver and Wendy gets him something from the CB radio and he comes and that's how that happens, it's a fine movie. It's just like a thriller.
Yeah.
And then you can absolutely defend the Jack Nicholson casting and you can absolutely be like, oh my God, they killed it. And it's just like a good horror movie instead of the worst adaptation of all time. So that was a rant. I don't know if that's what you were looking for there, but
Yeah.
that's my thoughts. You, I don't know what you did. You just unlocked the levee. You flipped the switch. It was coming out.
No, I get you. I mean, my biggest takeaway after watching the movie is like, I'm like, wow, they really de-emphasized the shining aspect.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, I totally understand as well that is a hard thing to film, especially in
1980.
Yeah, especially then.
You don't have special effects. Yeah.
No, but it was really de-emphasized. And I think that is important to come across. The only other things I'd have, that you really need to get right is the descent into madness. And what I don't know is, I think this is what Stephen King expressed a little bit on Jack Nicholson, was that he felt it tipped the hand a little too much that Jack was going to go, nuts, because he was like, we already know him from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson just also has that look about him. It just tees it up a little bit too much. And I think even when I'm reading this, it doesn't feel completely like that might be the way it goes.
Okay, but one,
Yeah.
I agree with your take completely that is super important. If you're going to make an adaptation of The Shining, like a true adaptation, you need The Shining, because without it, you don't get Jack's descent into madness. You just think he's going crazy because he's cooped up. But at the same time, if you get rid of The Shining, I think having a Jack Nicholson there is like, and kind of tipping the hand builds that anticipation of what's to come in the movie and keeps you there. And so I'm conflicted because I think with what the movie became, it's a great casting choice. But if they were going to be true to The Shining, I also agree with you that it would, at Stephen King, that it may not have been the right choice for the role.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What do you think the book did well?
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very little critique I have of that book. And I think one of the things you have to mention if you talk about what the book did well is the way he is able to tackle those complex topics we talked about from both a child's perspective and the adult perspective, and the way he can flip back and forth between what Danny's experiencing with, I'm going to use alcoholism as the example, what Danny's experiencing with his dad's alcoholism versus what Jack's experiencing with his alcoholism. And that is just like I said earlier, it's just a masterclass in multi-perspective writing that I think a lot of people who attempt it and fail maybe miss the mark a little bit, where on that specific point, where even if like their plot's strong, the narrative's not there. And Stephen King nailed it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I would say on that, I love when books shift the perspective like that, whether it's chapter by chapter or, within, a chapter. I think it's so interesting to see a story play out from those various viewpoints, and it really complicates like
Yes.
what is actually happening, and it gives more of this full body
Yeah.
experience. So it's really fun seeing, I mean, actually it's not fun at all seeing, Danny, Jack, Wendy's perspective. Even Dick gets on a pretty high rotation later on in the book. I
Yeah.
think it's such a great style of writing, but it's also, like you said, pretty hard to pull off. You have to write really convincingly from these various perspectives, and he does it.
You know what I think the book did really well, and we can talk about character arcs and like this being a character study in a second, because I think in chapter 1, like he comes out swinging, and you're like, Ullman's a dick. Jack's fell on some rough times. You're almost like pro Jack by the end of chapter 1. You know something happened, and maybe he's like got a character flaw. But by the end of chapter 3, you're like, oh, you're a monster. Yeah, you broke Danny's arm. Like, oh, this is what's wrong with you. Not you. You didn't just like get unlucky and get fired, which is, and I think the way he toyed with your emotions and how you felt about the character was brilliant. I mean, it took 20 pages to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was insane.
Yeah, I mean, and what was also messing with me was the very little I knew of this, knowing the "Here's Johnny" line, and I just assumed that like the story wasn't going to go well. But then his name was Jack, and I'm like, well, who the hell's Johnny? And then they tell the story of, that's literally what I was thinking the whole time. They tell the story of, the prior, what do they call them? Not groundskeeper, but whatever his title was for the hotel. The prior when Grady killed his whole family. I'm like, oh, wait, is maybe Grady this person? Is that Jack Nicholson? So like you said, yeah, it's just like everything there seems seedy and you're not really sure what Jack's take is. And it just builds this just incredible suspense that things are going to go off the rails, but you don't know when or how. And like the impending snowstorm and the questioning of like, what is reality and what's not. And that unreliable narrator, which he uses here, is one of my favorite storytelling devices, because you start to just question everything you're reading of like, what's happening? And then when finally things reach the crescendo of like Jack is fully off his rocker, it's just like, it's on. Like, it was so well done.
Well, so I'm gonna throw a comparison at you, and I want to know what you think of it. Anakin Skywalker, Jack Torrance. I think you can make the argument that they have pretty similar high-level storylines.
Yeah.
Somebody who wants to do good but is ultimately drawn to the dark side, so back to drinking.
Yeah.
I'm not going to labor the Star Wars side of this. And then, there's that back and forth between what the dark side and the hotel is doing to him versus what he wants to do for his son and what he knows is right for his son. And then in the end, in his final moments, he uses that to do something that ultimately saves his family when he regains that like sense of consciousness and goes away so that he can't fix the boiler so that the hotel explodes. I mean, it's the ultimate act of love.
Yeah. So
after this child's lifetime of you tormenting him.
Yeah.
It's a bit labored. I know. I'm working through it.
I'll take
still,
it. I mean,
is it that wrong? Is
Dick being essentially Obi-Wan Kenobi fully on board with that? I mean, Dick is probably my favorite character in The Shining.
I like it.
And Obi-Wan is my favorite Star Wars character. So it checks out. I don't see a flaw in your logic.
I realize it's not an exact science there, but there's a lot of parallels in that character arc.
Yeah, there's some storytelling devices that are definitely, they're filling a little bit of a similar spot within. One other thing I liked about the book, that I think sometimes with a horror, movie or book, not that I endeavor into the book end too much, but at least on the movie end, you kind of know where you're going to arrive at. Like, either most of these people are going to die, or they're all going to die. One's going to make it out. And in this one, I had some of that as well, but I sincerely really didn't have any idea how it was going to go down at the end. And, I could think, oh yeah, Danny will probably escape somehow. But
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what was going to be like the match that sparks this. And I really kept thinking he was going, Jack was going to find, alcohol hidden somewhere and he was going to go back on a bender and that's what was going to cause this. And I just really couldn't see, especially because I didn't know the whole Shining bit. Like, I had no idea going into this that there was going to be like this telepathic connection between people, that it threw me for a loop. And I was like, I have no idea where the story is going. And I think he did such a great job of keeping you on your toes throughout it.
Would you say that Danny is almost like a reverse chosen one trope?
I mean, essentially, he is, strong in the Force for sure.
He is strong in the Force.
Yeah. And, all of this, which I think there's some differing perspectives on this, but one thing that I did not like in the book was I did not like in the movie was that you didn't come away, I think, clearly with that the hotel was mainly after Danny and going through Jack.
Yeah.
And in the book, it is very clear that this hotel is trying to keep Danny here. And he is the chosen one, in that regard. And I thought that was so interesting because I really didn't see that coming at all either.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing. You know how I feel about the book. And because you know how I feel about the movie, I think I'm going to spare everybody from hearing me rant again. But what did you think the movie did well?
Yeah, I think I have. So I read this book it was pretty much the entirety of May. And by the entirety of May, I read this in like a week and a half because it was so good. And I probably watched the movie in late June. Since then, so I've had a few months. I've watched a lot of behind the scenes stuff. There are things I've warmed on a little bit. I'm used to this feeling. I read a lot of books and then watch the movies, and sometimes it's just like that initial reaction is like, this is not what I expected or wanted or I thought this was going to do.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that at first, and I've cooled off on some things and can appreciate, it being its own standalone piece instead of an adaptation. So if I try and think of what did I think the movie did really well, I thought there was a point where Jack Nicholson really hit his stride in the movie, acting as Jack.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfortunate that I didn't know that Jack was going to be the bad guy just because I'd seen clips of Here's Johnny. And, he just kind of already has a little bit of a crazed look to him in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
But it was, I remember the exact scene where I was kind of speechless from it. It's when he falls asleep at the typewriter and he's having that nightmare.
Oh, what a scene.
And Wendy is waking it up and he just loses it.
Jack! Jack! What happened? Honey, what's wrong? Jack!
Most terrible nightmare I ever had.
And I think from that point on,
It's okay, it's okay.
Jack Nicholson, he was cooking in that movie. And I think he really nailed the character from then on out. I think that was, so. Good his take. Portrayal there was just so good. Just so good.
Yeah.
And I think the only other I'll go to, and then I'd like to hear yours. Unless you want to say anything about that before I continue.
No, I actually think that like that's a really good take, and I think maybe I felt he was kind of in that stride a little bit sooner than you did, but I agree that scene is followed by him immediately going to the bar, and that's when we meet Lloyd for the first time. And I mean, that scene I think could win an award.
Totally.
When Lloyd, the actor who played Lloyd, had a very dry delivery, and I am absolutely positive that was a Kubrick note and intentional. So I'm not saying anything about that performance, but the way that Jack acted against that and how just incredible that scene was when he's monologuing at the bar.
Oh my God.
I mean, that is, I don't understand why that scene isn't monologued more, like why I don't see a million TikTok or YouTube clips of people monologuing that scene, because it's incredible.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. I think that's a really good take on Jack, and I really like that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that scene, like, and I think that this spreads out a little bit further in there stylistically, like the way that shot is crafted is unbelievable, where you see him alone at the bar and the camera's panning around, and then Jack Nicholson is looking down, and then all of a sudden he looks up and just goes, into Lloyd talking to him.
Yeah.
It's just, it was unbelievable.
A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Mr. Torrance. What'll it be?
I'm awfully glad you asked me that, Lloyd, because I just happen to have 2 20s and 2 10s right here in my wallet. I was afraid they were going to be there till next April. So here's what. You slip me a bottle of bourbon, a little glass, and some ice. You can do that, can't you, Lloyd? You're not too busy, are you?
No, sir. I'm not busy at all.
Good man. You set him up and I'll knock him back, Lloyd. One by one.
I mean, the way they shot it to his performance there it was so good. The other things I liked about the movie were I liked the tricycle as a kind of this literal vehicle for storytelling, and it gave some reason for him to be, Danny to be out wandering around and to show him just like exploring this hotel on his own. And then I just also thought the suspense, like when I was watching, especially because this is not in the books, I don't know what's going on with this tricycle bit. And every time Danny's turning a corner, I'm like holding my breath, like what's going to be there? What's going to be there? And I thought that was really great filmmaking. And I think also like the steady cam and this tracking shot was something that hadn't been done before and is now like a hallmark, thing that they did in movies. So I thought that was a really inventive choice for us to kind of cruise around the Overlook with Danny. I like that a lot.
That is not something I had considered before, and I actually really like that. I think you're warming me up to the movie in that respect. I think also that I wish I had that kind of insight that you just had while I was watching the movie, because I think it would have made it a more enjoyable experience, because I think for me, I just kind of felt like I knew where it was going anyway, and they just changed how Danny was getting there, not the fact that like, oh, this could be different. And that's really cool. And I can see that making the movie a lot more suspenseful, because you're right. I kept waiting for more ghosts to show up and they didn't. And that would have been a really cool way for him to run into more.
Yeah, I know. It was like, especially just knowing like some of the visions he has in the book. I was like, oh my God, what is he going to run into turning one of these corners? So I thought that was terrifying. I mean, I think too, like we didn't talk about this and like what you got to get right with this movie. And I think one of the things you got to get right is the hotel has to feel sort of oppressive in a way, and
Mm-hmm.
it has to have. I mean, it's written, pretty detailed up to like how it looks and how it feels and what the rooms are
Yeah.
like and kind of the grandioseness of it. And I think they did a
Yeah.
great job of the sets on this one. Um, and just how it looks and how it sounds and how it feels like there's definitely like an artistic flair to this that I think that works, that if was applied to maybe a little more faithful in some areas, there's a lot more good here than I initially thought, but I've really kind of
Okay.
come around to in the past month or two. But there are still some egregious choices that I can't get over.
You know what choice they made that I actually think was brilliant and I really appreciated was seeing room 217
Mhm.
through Jack's perspective rather
Yeah.
than Danny's. And while it was essentially the same, as we saw in the book with Jack, I think putting it's kind of hard to read because you're like, oh my God, this is a child.
Mhm.
And then if you had to see that as well, I think people would have really not enjoyed that. So I think stylistically, just having, that gap where if you've read the book, you knew exactly what
Mhm.
happened. And then the room is experienced through Jack's eyes was I don't want to say the right choice, but really it's the only
Yeah.
choice for a movie adaptation there. And I think that was perfect.
Mhm. Yeah. I'd agree with that. Moving along, what's your best book scene?
This didn't scare me, but one of the scenes that I think shows a lot about what Jack was going through and what now, you learn these facts about what Stephen King was going through was that very labored wasp metaphor.
Mhm.
And the fact that
Yeah.
he acknowledges it's a labored and imperfect metaphor, and it's a writer writing a writer using a metaphor that they know is poor, but at the same time, you learn so much about Jack
Yeah.
and where he is, and it leads into scary moments like when Danny's stung and with
Mhm.
all the wasps and I mean it was a that really stuck with me, and I don't know if I have a better explanation than the one I just gave you, but I really liked that scene, and I think that's probably not a lot of people's favorite scene in the book, but that is definitely in my top 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, now that you mention it, it is something that they continually return to in the book.
Throughout the whole
Yeah.
story.
And as Jack keeps slipping further and further from reality, yeah, just the new takes on the wasp it's interesting. I didn't think about that. It's a good aspect though.
Uh, what are your I mean, we talked a little bit about your favorite scenes. You said the scenes with the hedges, and all of the scenes with the hedges.
Yeah, I mean, who thought?
What was it specifically about them? And then what else you got in the tank for favorite scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if you would have told me that I would be terrified of dog and lion trimmed hedges, would not have believed you. But he made them terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's one of
Yes.
those critical parts of this book where I'm like, Jack's experiencing it, Danny's experiencing it. Like, what is happening here? And the combo Danny one when he gets trapped in the tunnel. Oh my God. That was
Yeah.
brutal. The only other, there's sort of two dick scenes that I would want to shout out for the book. I mean, the first Danny interaction with Dick, I loved because it was the first time, at this point, Danny had only been talking to Tony.
Yeah.
And this is the first time he communicated with someone else. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, he can
Yeah.
telepathically speak to this random guy. And this whole conversation, I was just like pretty riveted by. And I think their
That's
relationship
a
as
good
a
one.
whole, what was that?
I said, no, that's a good one. Yeah.
I mean, their relationship
I like
as a
where you're
whole,
going with that.
and Dick, I mean, I always love that sort of crescendo at the end of the book where, you know, Dick is trying to arrive back at the hotel to save them.
Yes.
And it's flipping back and forth between the perspectives. So him finally getting there, it was just incredible. Really like that a lot. You know, big.
Dick was a really good vehicle to build suspense in the book. Actually, you know what I think the movie did well? I have a good adaptation thing that I think I forgot to mention is I actually liked that they changed it from a literal snowmobile to those bigger snow vehicles because it felt a lot more realistic to me than them doing that trek, especially like anybody wounded doing that trek in that snow. I just really think that was a good choice. And I don't know if that was intentional or what just happened to be there.
Yeah.
But either way, I think it works well.
Yeah. What about the scene, speaking of the snowmobiles, when, you know, it's all done, they're trying to get out of there, and Dick goes into the shed to get I forget if it's the other snowmobile or something he needs in there, and he starts having the thoughts.
It's the blankets.
Of killing
and
Danny. And I was like, no.
I'm with you. I thought it was 100%. I'm with you. I thought it was going there and love that. But when you kill Dick in the movie, you don't get to do that.
No, I'm so mad about that.
You don't get to have a very important, in my opinion, important scene there. But
couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe he showed up in the movie and just dead instantly.
Literally axed. Yeah. They literally axed him.
It's like,
that's when I started screaming, actually. Yeah. When I was telling you I was screaming at my parents earlier, or to my parents earlier, that's when I started.
Oh, that made me so mad. Yeah, but
what was your...
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, for me, settling on, you know, best book scene, I think was my OG answer from the earlier questions. It's when he goes into room 217.
Great answer. Yeah, and that's a great take. Those are great scenes. I mean, those are terrifying.
Yeah.
But what's your favorite movie scene?
I think it's definitely what you mentioned, Jack and Lloyd at the bar. I think it is just complete, you know, just perfection, you know, all around how they did it. We don't need to say much more about that. Like I said, Jack having the nightmare. I love that scene when you first see him slipping. And I think I would stick with those. Honorable mention too. I do love when he's just completely snapped and he is breaking through the doors and screaming for Wendy and just all of his quotes back and forth.
Here's Johnny.
Yeah. Light of my life. Yeah. It's just going bananas.
Stay away from me. Please. Don't hurt me.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Stay away from me.
Wendy.
Stay away.
Darling. Light of my life. I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.
He's so good at that.
Yeah. I mean, both of them were just going for it. You know, Wendy really pulled off, you know, or Shelley Duvall really pulled off, you know, being absolutely terrified. And he was just having it.
She crushed that. Yeah.
Best movie scene for you? Is it Lloyd at the bar?
I was going to say the end credits because I knew the movie was over, but
actually, I don't like that because there's that photo of Jack in like the Overlook in 1921.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
No, Jack at the bar. I mean, we talked about it extensively. Yeah. I think I think that whole sequence of scenes starting with the one you mentioned, or maybe a little bit earlier, where he is starting to lose it, and you really start to see it. I think I can't remember if this is before or after the scene you talk about, but the scene where he's like looking over the hedge maze, and you can just see in his eyes that something like that he's gone, and if you read the book, the like new Jack has taken over, or the haunting of Jack has happened, and starting there, and then the nightmare scene, and then just him at the bar. It's just that bar scene, man. That's a good one.
What is your perspective on the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy?
As a device for the movie to show his descent into madness, I think it's brilliant. And I think the fact that when you're reading those pages, you see changes in indentation, you see spelling mistakes, you see grammar mistakes, you see words that just are gibberish in the middle of those sentences. That was, and you see it with like dialogue boxes and like how you would write a screenplay, really.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a cool nod to the play he's supposed to be writing, and B, a really cool
Going well.
nod to him going crazy. Or I don't want to say him losing it, because in the movie, yeah, it's him losing it, but in the book, it's the haunting of Jack.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I did. Yeah, I agree. In the movie, I especially because it's not in the book. And in the book, he was actually making progress on the play for a while. But when you see the papers in the movie, it was just one of those, this guy is gone, like kind of a holy shit moment.
Yeah, that's a good adaptation choice. I don't think we gave it credit in that section, but that's a good adaptation choice.
Scariest scene for you?
In the movie or the book?
User choice.
I think the fire extinguisher was or the fire hose. I think that was so scary for me because that's such a mundane object that normally you wouldn't be scared of. Because at least with the hedges, there's the uncanny valley, right? You have actual horror techniques used there. When it's the fire extinguisher, I feel like he takes an inanimate object and makes me rather take my chance with a fire than put it out.
Literally.
You know, and I want to give that scene some credit there.
Yeah, that was up there. I mean, I think you've nailed them all with, or what we've already talked about with 217, Danny in there, the fire hose, Topiary Garden. The only honorable mention I'd have outside of those is, man, when Shelley is in the room and the elevator starts coming to life in the middle of the night, that's the type of stuff that gets me.
And they didn't do that at all in the movie.
Yeah. Oh my God. And that was where I was really questioning it, because at this point in the book, I don't think Wendy had seen or experienced anything within the Overlook. And there was the one part where they go to check on the elevator and Jack is like, there's nothing going on, Wendy. Like, you're losing it.
Yes.
And she picks up like the streamers from the party or something and throws them at him. And that's when I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
What do you think? And maybe, we don't want to go on for another hour here. What do you think was the worst adaptation choice?
Okay. So essentially all of it. I think what I went on a rant about earlier. There's no context for The Shining, and without context for The Shining, the conversation with Dick just became dead space in that movie. Also, having Tony at all becomes dead space if we're not going to talk about The Shining. And I think that if you just eliminate it altogether and make it a horror film where it's just about a guy going crazy, the movie's instantly better. Because, there's no context for The Shining, which means there's no context for why Danny's neck has been bruised. It gives you when you don't have context for that, you don't get a context into Jack's mind and his descent into his haunting by the hotel. So without that, they got rid of the boiler. The boiler is such and that scrapbook, there's such massive pieces of that book that were just completely ignored. And then not having the elevator scenes. I like the elevator scene they did have, but to your point, that was such a telling scene, and it was also horrifying, and I think it would have been easy-ish for them to throw in there as like a Danny, Jack, and Wendy scene where they're all together.
Yeah.
I just didn't like it. It just made it so that there was no nuance to Jack. And then to your point, we keep talking about reality, like and Jack losing it, but in something where there's so clearly this paranormal activity, Jack's reality is being haunted. It's not like he's losing his mind. He's just being taken over by these demons or evil spirits, or I don't know what you want to call them, but it completely changes the context. And I think it lost the essence of what the book is.
Yeah. What's interesting is I think there is a take that he is succumbing to his own demons in the book and not the demons of the hotel, which I think is what makes it such a great book. Like, was he always destined to fail, or was he actually kind of righting his ship in his life and the hotel derailed this? And I still don't know how I feel about it. And I think you're spot on that the movie is such a less nuanced version of this, because you really get this perspective in the book, especially first half, from when you see Jack's
It's really insightful
internal monologue, that he's really trying to change and he's trying to do right and get back on with his writing and be a good dad. And he really does love Danny and care for him. And it feels like this person who just succumbs to these demons due to things that are somewhat, I don't want to say outside of his control and completely dismiss his choices. But at least in comparison to the movie, where it feels like he's already a little bit of an angry guy, and by the end he just has an existential rage breakdown, like goes ballistic.
I think that's a really insightful take, and I need to think about that for a while before I can respond. We might have to come back and do that again, because that's I mean, Randy, I think that's really like, that's like a thinker.
Yeah.
I can't, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think you analyzed that on like a level that I don't think I would have gotten to by myself. So I need a second.
Yeah, I mean, this book is full of it.
I need to figure out if velociraptors are real here, Randy. Okay, literally. I need to.
I'm still turned around.
That's heavy. That's heavy.
Yeah, I mean, this book is heavy. I mean, you are really taken in to the mind. And you mentioned this earlier, the perspective of reading this when you're younger versus older. And I think if I was 16 years old or 20 and read this, I might feel zero sympathy for Jack and be like, this guy is 100%, an asshole, and there's zero redeeming qualities. And I think being older and just having a little more life experience, I have marginal sympathy that he was trying to make some good decisions and correct some things in his life. And, it really just went off the rails here. And I think I have more of that as I'm older, and that doesn't come through, I think, in the movie, which is unfortunate.
I have nothing to add. I think you just nailed it. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the only other adaptation choices I'd throw out, you mentioned it already. Man, they did our boy Dick dirty. Just massacred him.
So dirty.
Literally.
Dick,
yeah, that was unfortunate.
Literally accent.
Which is even more of a shame, because I really liked the casting for that. And I thought there was such potential. I was really excited as they were getting it. I was like, oh, this guy's like good. He's like kind of what I imagined Dick to look like a little bit in the way he's acting, and it just didn't pan out. In the end, I think it's interesting. Well, two things with the end. Jack dying in the maze from freezing had no idea that was going to happen in the movie. And one, I never realized that is the GIF. Like when you type in like freezing, that's him. And I saw that scene. I was like, oh my God, that's the GIF.
Yeah.
And two, just the photo at the end of him, you know, that says like 1921, you know, Jack's in the front posing. And it just opens up this. Was he, you know, what is going on here? Like, why are they here? And why is this so centered on Jack? And was he always the caretaker? Like, what's going on? And I think if this was a standalone movie, that would be a real mind-blowing thing at the end. You know, it's kind of like an Inception, you know, the totem spinning.
Yeah.
But after the book, I was so confused of like, why is this so centered on Jack? And what is this supposed to be meaning here? So I just thought that was odd.
I hear you. I agree.
Best quote. You can go book or movie.
So I don't have the actual quote in front of me, but when Danny asked Dick what that lady meant about getting in the bellboy's pants, I thought it was hysterical.
That was really fun.
And I thought I actually laughed out loud when we were having that conversation. And that is what I was talking about. Like the perfect, like there's no way a child that young would understand that reference.
Yeah.
And for him to just ask Dick and then Dick to just lose it. I was laughing with Dick, you know, at that comment. And I really like that one.
Yeah, I agree that actually did make me laugh a lot. There was so much comedy to some of the Dick stuff. Him in general was pretty great. I think there's an obvious one. You know, most people are going to say best quote. You know, here's Johnny.
Here's Johnny.
Which, like I said, I was so confused when reading this.
Classic.
I was like, who the hell is Johnny? As I started the book. It's just Johnny Carson, as you know, they're referencing. In the movie, I did like the all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. The other quote I really liked was when Grady and Jack are in the bathroom and, you know, Grady's like, you've always been the caretaker. You've always been here. Jack is, you can just see like at this point, Jack just has zero clue what's going on and is like really questioning everything. I thought that was a good one. And then just also his Jack Nicholson screaming, you know, as he's breaking through, you know, the other stuff besides the here's Johnny is, you know, Wendy darling, you know, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to bash your brain. Like he's just going for it. And those are just pretty classic scenes.
Yeah. No, those are good. All right, Randy, who won the book and who won the movie?
Book. I think it's got to be Dick for me. I loved all of the scenes.
Yeah.
He saves the day. He introduces us to The Shining with Danny and gives us context for that. He tells us even what The Shining is. We keep coming back to him and knowing he's going to return at some point. And then he does, you know, kind of in, you know, the heroic fashion and
spectacular.
I just thought he was such a great character.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's a good one. I'd say maybe Danny won the book.
Yeah. Danny was great in the book.
I just think Danny was just a great character in the book. Nobody won the movie.
Stephen King
not the audience.
Won the movie.
Yeah, at least he got paid.
Yeah.
I did not get paid for sitting through that atrocity. So
I think the hotel won.
Who won the movie for you?
I think the hotel won the movie.
Probably.
I think it really boomed this idea of a haunted hotel. And in the movie, the hotel kind of wins in the end. it's Jack
Yeah.
stays there. They don't get Danny, but Jack is there, and Dick
They get Dick
dies.
though,
Yeah.
and Dick had the shine.
Yep. So
Shining.
I'd say the hotel one, but
I like that.
Yeah. What do we want to move on to next?
I was gonna say, if you want to jump into the trivia, I got a couple for you.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's rip through. I've got some good ones here. I didn't know if you knew this, because Danny Lloyd, who played Danny, was so young and it was his first acting job. Stanley Kubrick was highly protective of him, and during the shooting of the movie, he was under the impression that he was making a drama movie, not a horror movie. In fact, when in the scene where Wendy is carrying Danny away while Jack is shouting, she has a dummy. So Lloyd, Danny wouldn't have to be in the scene. And it was only years later that he realized that he was shown an edited version of the movie that was a drama, and that he had no idea that this was a horror movie, because Stanley didn't want to subject him to like just the intensity of going through that. And that's a real nice side that you get to see of Stanley Kubrick there, to like really protect this kid on set, because that could be really traumatizing.
I feel a little bad now because I have been ripping him apart all episode.
Yeah. But I thought that was really interesting.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found that one and shared that. That's really nice.
Yeah. The other is where Shelley Duvall said the Here's Johnny scene took 3 days and 60 doors to complete. I mean, that's just classic Kubrick right there. So there's the spectrum.
Right.
Of like completely reasonable to completely perfectionist.
Great being.
To get Jack Nicholson in the right agitated mood, he was fed only cheese sandwiches for 2 weeks, which he hates. I mean, first of all, if we're talking grilled cheese, this is on you, Jack Nicholson. You just got bad taste. But two,
is it just cheese and bread though? Like,
I don't know.
When you say cheese, I think of like the British that put like it's like just bread, a piece of cheese, and like a little bit of mayo. And that's what I'm picturing.
That's what I'm thinking too. And even then, I'm like, I'll eat a cheese sandwich. Maybe after 2 weeks, I'd be annoyed with it. But if he's disparaging grilled cheese sandwiches,
True.
You have your own issues.
I will concede, if it's grilled cheese, then, but you know what? Only a crazy person wouldn't like a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah,
and look what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess maybe he's more of a method actor than I thought. When first released, the film had an alternate ending. After the shot of Jack's body, the film dissolves to a scene of a policeman outside the hotel. It then cuts to a scene in a hospital where Wendy is resting in a bed and Danny is playing in the waiting room. Ullman arrives and tells her that they have been unable to locate her husband's body anywhere on the property. On his way out, Ullman gives Danny a ball, the same one that mysteriously rolled into a hallway earlier in the film, before Danny was attacked in room 237. Ullman laughs and walks away, and the film dissolves to move through the corridors towards the photo. This was removed a week after the film was released, and the original ending, or the ending we now know, is there.
Interesting.
But he was really planning on diverting the ending there and making Ullman even more complicit. Speaking of Ullman,
why did they cut it?
Why did they cut it? I don't know. I didn't follow my Google search any deeper than that level. But I know it was, we talked about at the top, I knew he was adjusting the movie almost on the fly as it was releasing, and he was getting feedback, and maybe this was something that he was having second thoughts on towards the end. Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall have expressed open resentment against the reception of this film, feeling that critics and audience credited Stanley Kubrick solely for the film's success without considering the efforts of the actors, crew, and the strength of Stephen King's underlying material. They said that this was one of the hardest things they've ever done in their career. In fact, Nicholson says he considers Shelley's performance the most difficult role he's ever seen an actress take on. And I feel that. I mean, and there were, I think at the time, I think the Razzies still existed then, and they were like giving it to Shelley and like making fun of her. I mean, first of all, like I feel like the Razzies are just such a shitty thing in the world. Like people who like get off on just like putting people down for like taking a role and giving an honest, like it just kind of drives me crazy. But
that was like the early form of internet trolls.
Yeah, really. Like you have nothing better to do. Yeah, kind of winds me up.
That one surprises me.
Again, this is
because I don't think, like, I think if anything, it would be the opposite, that Shelley and Jack and Danny and Stephen King would get all the credit for that movie being any sort of success because of the decisions that were made. But
yeah, I think it was just, you know, if I'm placing myself then, and even now looking back with hindsight, just the filmmaking end of it is so, it was pretty monumental then and just so different that people were kind of blown away. Like, wow, this we haven't seen something like this before. And a lot of the focus was on that. And a lot of people were like really annoyed with how Stanley wrote Wendy in the movie and then blamed her for that. Which is like just classic. But yeah, I mean, that is interesting. Like you think if this was not that critically well received at the time, that Stephen King would be getting the credit. So maybe this is one where we're calling some bullshit on IMDb trivia.
Yeah.
But I do, they have both said that this was one of the hardest things they've ever done in their career. Working with him.
That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
I completely agree that I would say most actors that worked with Kubrick would say that was one of the hardest things they've done in their career.
What were you going to say?
It's that first part. I know it's just that first part. I don't believe it. Because we're not talking about a massive box office hit.
No.
It did well. Good, not great. People didn't like the movie.
Yeah.
And then they're going to credit the director for what?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No. Yeah, I agree. And maybe this was more years later too. They're talking about
that could.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I've watched a lot of stuff that was at the time of this coming out. I'd be interested to see if there's anything recent from Shelley Duvall of her talking about it and just what her perception is of it, because I haven't seen any of that.
Didn't she quit acting because of this? Is that in your opinion?
I don't know. That's a good question. We'll have to follow up on that next episode. I know she had a really hard time during the filming of this, and that she definitely took a break after. But I'm not sure. She might have quit. It does sound a little bit familiar. All right, I got two more. The one was Jack Nicholson has said that there were so many changes to the script during shooting. A scene change was made almost daily, that he claimed that he stopped reading the script and he would read only the new pages that he was given that day. He said eventually when he was given a revised scene or a new script, he would just throw it in the trash knowing another was coming anyway. That also sounds like a little bit like just Hollywood, like BS, but still funny nonetheless.
I actually hope that one's true. It might be BS, but I hope that one's true.
Yeah, me too. And the last one was the Jim Carrey story. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Dumb and Dumber famously filmed at the Stanley Hotel, the inspiration for The Shining, and Jim Carrey was a big fan of the book. He loves the Shining book and he loves the movie. And when he's the best. When they were filming Dumb and Dumber, he requested, he was like, I want to stay in room, it's 217 at the Stanley Hotel. I don't think they have a 237, or it's the inverse. I can't remember. And apparently at around 1 or 2 in the morning, Jim Carrey got up and left the hotel, checked out, and didn't come back. And he was so freaked out. And in interviews since then, when people ask him about what happened, he refuses to talk about it. And there's YouTube videos of him walking off the interviews and doesn't want to speak about what he experienced there.
Wow. No way.
I know. That also could be, I don't know, just Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey. But
it doesn't feel like Jim Carrey to just walk out of a movie set, though.
Yeah.
He's everything I've heard. He's always, I mean, he's a goofy guy that's writing comedy most of the time, but he's like a hard worker.
Yeah, he's dedicated to the craft.
Dedicated to the craft. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and we were talking about horror a little bit and goes to the beginning. When I stayed there, at that time, I only knew Dumb and Dumber, and I was so pumped about it to be going there. And we were waiting our room wasn't ready, which is funny because the like villas that they have there are called the Outlook, or the Overlook, sorry. And so we're waiting in the courtyard in the Colorado Lounge. Yeah. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I asked one of the receptionists or one of the bartenders, I was like, hey, where's the closest bathroom? They're like, there's one down here, that's kind of in the gift shop, but there's also one in the wing we don't use anymore. And that should have been the first red flag. I walked back there, and with no preconception, I'd never seen the movie, I'd never read it at this time. I walked into this hallway, and I just got like the weirdest feeling, like hair stood on my like arms. And I just got this like foreboding, like I got to get out of here. And like, I don't even think I went to the bathroom. I think I turned around and walked out of the hallway. It was like, I can't do this. It was like I don't know, just one of those weird experiences where just something feels off. And it was probably because I'm a baby and she was like, this wing is abandoned and it was like kind of dark in there, but I was out in a second. So I think Jim's telling the truth.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm sold.
Yeah. That was all I had for the trivia, but there's so much, but I gotta cut it off there.
Yeah, those are some good ones.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break and then we'll hit some of the closing stuff. Let's wrap this up and rate it. Book rating out of 237. What are you giving this book?
Dude, a 237.
Yeah.
I told you I had to sleep with the light on for a month the first time I read this book. So it's, in my mind, S tier writing, like horror writing.
Yeah.
Tried reading other authors that write in the horror genre, and I can't recreate that feeling with anyone else with Stephen King's books.
Yeah. 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 He was at his best. Not that I've read any other Stephen King at this point, but this feels like someone who's just like in the zone. It's like Tiger Woods 2002 right now.
That's a great analogy.
Movie.
What are you ranking this movie though?
The movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, movie rating out of, we'll do 217 for the movie. I'm gonna give it a 175. I think there's, which I can't do in my head right now. Where it's morning here. I have no idea what percentage this is. This is probably like a B minus. There's a lot of grade here, and I think the legacy has served it well, and it did a lot for Jack Nicholson's career, I think. And even if a movie adaptation doesn't hit the same beats that I wanted it to from a book, I'm always excited to just kind of see a story retold and kind of get this different perspective. And even, like I said, even though I'm upset with some of the decisions, I'm happy we have it. And it has been, massively influential in the horror genre, which is cool. But there's a lot of problems I have with it too.
Okay, that's pretty good. And I did the math. That's an 80.6. So it is a B minus.
It is a B minus. Saturday morning math is going strong. What would you give the movie?
Okay, so I will say that after our conversation, I am rating this movie higher than I had anticipated.
What was your original?
It would have been like a 100.
100, yeah.
Which is by far an F.
Not passing class.
Yeah. But I'm going to give it a 162, which is a 75%.
Yeah.
It's like a solid C.
Yeah.
And you did convince me about some of the good things. And, we talk about from a filmmaking aspect and some of the masterclass acting that we get out of this film.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll give it a C. As an adaptation, I don't think it's very good.
No.
As a standalone movie, it can, if I hadn't read it and I just watched this movie, I probably would have thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But as an adaptation, I don't think they hit the mark at all.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure that this has been talked about before, but this one made me really think about this a lot. Of there's almost this 4-quadrant aspect to adaptations, where you can have a good adaptation, a good standalone, good adaptation, bad standalone, bad adaptation, good standalone, bad and bad.
Yeah.
This one to me is really falling in the category of bad adaptation but good standalone. If you watch or read each of these things on their own, they're pretty great. You're going to have a good time. It's two people who really know what they're doing, either with the pen or behind the camera. But in terms of hitting maybe the emotional through lines or the beats, the movie falls a little short in that regard. But it's still a good standalone piece of art. But like you said, it's a bad adaptation.
Also, my official recommendation for anyone that cares: watch the movie first.
Yeah.
Then read the book.
Mm-hmm.
That is the order in which you should enter The Shining.
Yeah.
If you're going to do both.
I'd agree with that. I mean, and I at this point in time, I can't imagine there's a person who, even if you're vaguely aware of The Shining, is unsure if Jack, is the bad person. Yeah. Even I was I was a little bit confused at first because, like I said, because of the Here's Johnny scene, but I was under no delusions that this was going to be the bad guy. So and even if you watch the movie and that, it's not going to take away anything from the book. If anything, the book might even be better if you watch the movie first. Because I think that aesthetic that it sets is really good in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what I would say too. I'd say if you're gonna approach these, I'd go movie first and then read the book. That way you can exit on that high of the book. What do you think? Do you want to rank the things we cover?
Sure.
I don't know. I'm a ranker. I like to sort things, even though it's completely arbitrary and meaningless. So this is the second one we've recorded. First one being Jurassic Park. What are you putting 1 and 2? I think we know the answer.
I mean, as an
adaptation.
Jurassic Park
1, Shining 2, yeah.
is standing on The Shining's neck.
Yeah,
it's
ripping out its intestines.
I would actually probably have Jurassic Park leave number 2 blank and then give The Shining 3.
Yeah, save it for whatever comes next.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of what comes next, is going to be The Last of Us, right? That's what we're doing?
Yeah.
So 3?
Yeah, next week we will be... It will be our first foray into the video game world, which will be exciting.
I'm curious to see how our episode will differ from the last 2 we've just done.
Yeah.
Because I'm imagining it's probably going to be pretty different because of the things we're going to talk about. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. This is a game that I love a lot. And I'm also coming off the heels of, I was just at Halloween Horror Nights and got to see The Last of Us house there. So I'm pumped for this. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Like Nick said, we're going to be entering into The Last of Us. We will be lost in the darkness looking for the light. I cannot wait to get to this one. We'll be taking a look at the 2013 game changer, pun intended, that was released on the PS3. Though I can't remember if I played on the PS3 or the PS4. I think the PS3. And the first full season of the HBO adaptation that aired earlier this year. If you have any thoughts you want to share about this game and TV adaptation, please reach out to us via email at readwatchplaypod@gmail.com or message us on readwatchplay on Instagram. If you have suggestions for future stories you would like to see us cover, give us a shout as well. Like we said last week, or in the last episode, this podcast it's kind of like Play-Doh right now. Nothing is set, still molding it. So if you have thoughts, send them in. You can find us on all your major platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review, 5 stars only, as those things help people find the show. I'm not bribing you, but 5 stars only. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Nick. Sincerely for recommending this one. This was an awesome book.
Oh God, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, you've always been the caretaker. Until next time, everybody. Take it easy.